Today's episode is brought to you by Kid Veen. Everyone has a sinister side. Discover your inner demon and satisfy your dark fantasies by joining the fast-growing gang of misfits currently wearing Kid Veen. Go to www.kidveen.com and use the code CREATIVE at checkout to receive 10% off your order. Every time one of you guys uses this code, I actually get a kickback. Affiliate links and sponsorship programs are one of the few ways to actually get a little bit of money back for content on this platform. So if you like the podcast and want to show some support, this is one of the best ways you can do it. Hello and welcome to another amazing episode of Creative Appetite. Today I'm joined by my good friend Casey
Skilbeck. Skilbeck.
What?
It's okay. It's not very common.
Terrible.
Very German.
Anyway, Casey is an amazing photographer. She specializes in portrait photography. She does a lot of weddings and she also does a lot of film photography, which comes up with a lot of different creative concepts. And I think personally for me, viewing your photos, it is cool to see film being taken in like a, I don't know, I wouldn't say like contemporary concept, but it seems like you have like a vision, not like the traditional style of film photography where it's like going and taking photos of like petrol stations and things of that nature, which I personally love, but yeah, it seems like you're doing a different style when it comes to film.
Yeah, a lot of people are doing that, right? Yeah, I don't even know how I would describe my photography. I would definitely say I am focused around portraiture. Outside of that, I like weird shit. I just like taking photos of stuff. Man, if I make somebody uncomfortable and they're like, oh, I don't want to look at this photo, but I can't look away. And then they like have to look a little bit closer to figure out what it is they're actually looking at or what's happening. Like that's my goal, is to get people a little bit on edge, but also curious. Like to bring out the curiosity in people is really nice.
Yeah, I definitely think you have a good, what is it when people say you have like a keen eye?
Oh, thank you.
So I sound very nasally, people. I've come from a different temperature and now I'm in a very cold temperature.
What about the temperature?
I feel like that's actually the real reason, not the fact that I went out and had a few beers when after having 6 months off.
Probably got nothing to do with it.
No, definitely not. Anyway.
Yeah, like help.
I definitely think you do have a keen eye though on your photography, especially when we first met. I was like, when I stumbled upon your stuff, I was like looking at it and just the way you can get two people together and get them in these weird angles and shapes, but it's like very artistic but very pleasing to the eye.
Thank you.
And you can kind of, I don't know, it brings like it does come with an emotion.
Yeah.
Which I find it's really hard in photography to actually capture emotion in their photos.
Yeah, and also communicating like a relationship between two subjects. And producing emotion, such an interesting concept, but it's definitely something that I'm always curious to find in my photos. Like the ones that stand out to me the most are definitely the ones that produce the most feeling, when I'm looking at them.
Did you ever like when you started doing photography, did you ever think that this is something you wanted to do full time, or did you kind of just do it for a bit of fun?
No, it's so funny, right? Because in high school, pretty much how I started with photography is that I was failing just about everything. Every subject I was doing really terribly in, and in my family, my parents were really pride themselves on the idea of me being the academic one. Both of my parents dropped out of school growing up, and then my sister just did not find herself in her element at school at all. And so I think for me, I was doing really well. And then I was super ambitious and decided to get 2 part-time jobs. So I was working like 40 hours a week, 10, 11, and 12. And I pretty much just started failing every class. And I went home one day and I was like, oh gosh, I'm going to be homeless. I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. As you do as a teenager when you think the whole world revolves around on your grades. And pretty much I had planned to drop out of media, and then I ended up failing everything. And my chemistry teacher was like, Case, if you take on chemistry, you're going to do really badly. I'd really encourage you to take on something like media that is a bit more your game. And I was like, oh, that was a bit of a hit. But anyway, I got really into media, and I decided like, okay, if this is the thing I'm going to do it really well. And I remember saying to people in school, like, oh, photographer's just a lazy videographer. I remember saying that to people. And then I used to say to people like, oh, there's nothing worse than a photographer than somebody that just shoots black and white. And then here I am, ladies and gentlemen, being a black and white photographer so much of the time. And I love photography. And I just think, you know, being a videographer is like such a headache, although I do dabble.
Isn't it funny how like you just talk so much shit when you're so uneducated?
Oh, totally.
And then you come full circle and you're like, oh man, I was that person.
Absolutely.
I was saying some really outlandish things.
Yeah, and also just like, man, there's so much in photography that I feel like the more you step into it, the more you're like, oh, wow, I can really produce so much emotion and so much interpretation, and things just so loose. And yeah, there's such a opportunity for involvement with the crowd, you know, when you're telling a story through a video or a short film. It's like, it's very direct what you're communicating. With photography, it's so much more open-ended, and you then kind of create this relationship with your audience so much more.
Yeah, definitely. And I was watching this video on like black and white photography, and they were talking about like the depth of black and white photography. Like it's not just a one shot kind of thing. Like with color, you can see depth in the color and things like that. But there's actually so much more to black and white. You can actually get depth within the black and white colors themselves.
Yeah, and I find it really simplifies things. One of the most talented photographers I've ever met, he introduced this concept to me of, when you're shooting, set your digital settings so you only see black and white in your images. He said to me like, oh, you know, I used to shoot and be looking at a screen with color on it, you know, and it would really distract me, and I'd get really like I wasn't achieving the result that I wanted. And so he ended up being like, oh, you know what, I'm just going to put my screen in black and white, and then if I see something, you know, it like just kind of brings it all in to like a really clear focus of like, it reduces the noise, you know.
Yeah.
And I felt like that was such a beautiful concept, to be like, okay, cool, like, you know, what's my subject, what am I honing in on, and then kind of figure out the rest around it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, instead of like being concerned about all the colours and like lighting and stuff,
Yeah,
you just put it black
so
and white, you
much
can
going
actually
on.
see what your, like the angle and what your subject's going to come in at.
Exactly. Yeah, it's way more clear.
Yeah, there's a lot of depth to photography. And I was actually had a meeting today with someone, and then we were talking about the podcast, and he goes, you seem to have a lot of photographers on your podcast. I'm like, it's not by choice. This isn't.
There's so many of us around.
I haven't just, sure. It's not something I'm gunning for to have a lot of photographers on, but for some reason, I have many photographers on at the moment.
Who have you had on? You've had TJ.
I've had, he's technically a videographer, so I wouldn't really. So I've had TJ, yourself, Benny, Siobhan. Who else have I had on as photographer? Oh. How many other? I've had a lot of people on. I'm trying to think now.
Yeah.
I think I've definitely had some more on. Sorry to anyone that I haven't mentioned. But yeah, they're the most fresh ones off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Which I guess is more than
maybe it's because you've got such a passion for photography. You know, you definitely angle in that way, and I can see that being such a creative field that you dabble in.
I've been pretty lazy lately though. I haven't really done much photography. I've been doing a lot of podcasting.
Yeah.
But it's great. I think I finally found my creative medium, which is
it's so interesting, right? I see creatives and they always take this turn, and I feel like creatives just end up pulling all these different mediums together, you know, and they involve themselves in so many different areas that are creative. But I find to hone in on one craft is like definitely a good skill set to have, you know, but I find most creatives are like drawn in so many different directions all the time.
Yeah, that was me for a long time. Even like growing up and going through different creative like projects or whatever. Every project to me was going to be, this is the best in the world project.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm gonna make it.
Tell me what you wanted to do when you were a kid. What was it? What did you want to be when you grew up?
When I grew up, I wanted.
Tell me the phases.
Yeah, all right. When I grew up, I wanted to be a famous actor.
Yeah, you did.
That was the first.
Heck yeah.
That was the first thing I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, I wanted to be a famous DJ.
Okay.
And then.
And have you pursued those things? Like, have you?
Yeah.
Gone
So
through,
I did acting through school
Mm-hmm.
and did some NIDA courses and stuff out of school.
Oh wow. Okay.
And then I DJ'd. Well, I've been DJing for about 6 years, but I haven't really done much in the last couple of years because I've been doing other things.
Yep.
And then what did I do after DJing? I wanted to be a surfboard shaper at one point.
Okay.
That was another crazy idea I had. Although I never did anything.
And
with
you've
that
invested into all these different areas, like you've.
The surfboard shaping one I haven't.
Okay.
But I have in all the other ones.
Yeah.
Cool. And then I came onto this one. This is the last one. I've done photography and stuff, but I never really saw it as something I wanted to pursue. It was just more of something I enjoyed doing.
Yeah.
And then when I moved to the Sunshine Coast, and I started the podcast, and then from there it's just taken off.
Yeah.
Which is great.
That's awesome. And you're doing so well with the podcast as well. It's really cool to see the trajectory that you're headed in.
Yeah.
There's so many great characters as well that have been on, which it's so cool to see locals like getting their opportunity to share about themselves.
Yeah, it's cool to like give someone a platform.
Yeah, absolutely.
To like share their story and let other people know and provide other pathways for people. Like I know that actually Tyler's another photographer that I had on. There we go. Now that's come to mind. So Tyler and Jesse from Kid Veen.
Oh yeah.
They linked up through this podcast.
Oh cool.
So I was like, oh cool. So it's
cool.
what I'm
so it's
doing.
bringing
It's
people
actually
together.
yeah, and that which is the whole concept. So I was like, this is really cool.
You know, I find that amazing. Like I'm from Perth, and when I go over there, every single time I'm like, all right guys, I'm coming home. I'll be in Perth for this amount of time. I get like instant 10 messages from different friends that are like, hey, we should tee up a shoot. We should go do this. We should go do this. And it's all these creatives. You know, I just get messages from so many creatives that are like, hey, I would love to do something, and I find the community atmosphere over there to be so much more involved, and so many more people are just happy to create with other people without getting much out of it other than the fact that they just get an opportunity to express themselves, you know. And then every time I come back here, I'm like, oh, wow, you know, nobody's really like teeing things up with other people and exploring things, which is cool. I've actually just started being in communication with more of the alter ego guys, if you know them. Yeah,
I don't know them personally. I briefly met them, or some of them, when they held that. What event was it? Oh man, I can't remember that.
Yeah, they've had a few events, but yeah, I've ended up reaching out to a couple of those guys and had them reach out to me as well and been like, hey, let's do a regular thing, you know, like once every week or two, like we get together with a group of people that want to either learn more about photography, or people that are already into photography and maybe don't have models, you know, or whatever that is, and just bridging those gaps between like whatever's stopping them from creating their concept and actually bringing it to life. So we have a shoot this Friday, which is going to be really cool, and got a bunch of really cool people together that are going to be involved in that. And that's how I met you as well, you know, like I keep trying to reach out to people and be like, hey, let's build this platform where people are creating with each other. And it was really nice, you know. It was like one of the first times I properly hung out with you is on this night where you remember the nighttime shoot, you know? It's so good. Yeah. And we like got all these people together and ended up going out to like Coolum or something, and shooting under the street lights with a bunch of mirrors. That was a really fun shoot.
That was a fun shoot, actually. That was cool.
Till the cops told us to go away, but up until that, it was really fun.
I mean, we were kind of standing.
We did stand in the middle of the road at like 1 a.m. So, you know,
but to be fair, at 1 a.m., you wouldn't think that there'd be cars driving around.
Yeah, apparently they were concerned for our safety, but anyway,
moving
good
right
night.
along.
It was a good night.
You met your love of your life there?
Not met him, but yeah, it's definitely first time that we spent some good quality time together.
What have you, out of the digital world and film world, what would you say is the most appealing?
Oh, it's so crazy. I feel like it's so easy to bounce back and forth. Digital, of course, like you can, take 1 million photos and there's no like fear of missing out. You know, you just take 100 of whatever you want and then you kind of like tweak it a little bit. With film, I feel like that's part of the romance of shooting is like, you know, you only have 36 shots on a roll that are going to look that way, and it's so much more expensive as well. You know, there's so many factors leading into you like cherishing each photo that you take and really trying to like plan it out and have a lot more thoughtfulness with it. But I think most photographers that shoot both film and digital would be, I think definitely would say the same in that you probably have like every 6 months you rotate and you're like, wow, I love film. I only want to shoot film. And you just don't pick up your digital camera for 6 months. And then like, you know, maybe you shoot a wedding or something where you have to pick up a digital camera and then you're like, oh, digital is so great, you know, and then you don't touch a film camera for the next 3 months and you're like, heck, film is so expensive, you know. I don't want to deal with that for a little while.
Film is expensive.
It's so expensive.
It's like podcasting. it costs you
Such a
so
labour of
much.
love, huh?
It costs you so much, and you get nothing out of it in terms of
Yeah.
like you don't make money unless you're like a famous film
Yeah, unless
photographer.
people are like paying you and want film specifically. Like I've done jobs for sure in the past where people have been like, oh, I just want to shoot film, or I want it to look like this, and then I'll be like, well, to get that look, you know, this is, you know, you want to be shooting on film and it's going to cost you a lot more. And I've had people do that, but it's definitely nice to have the luxury to just take a million photos and throw away whatever you don't use and it not feel like you're really missing out by throwing those photos away.
When did you first start? Like, what was your first paid job like, if you can remember?
Yeah, I think I can't think of like my first paid job, but I can definitely think of my first paid wedding. That was really beautiful. So an old high school friend reached out to me. We hadn't spoken in probably 3 or 4 years. And she just sent me this message on Instagram out of the blue and was like, hey, Casey, you know, I don't even know if you like ever think of me or remember me too well, but I'm getting married and it's coming up and I've been following your photography since high school and I just love the way you've progressed and I think your work's beautiful, and you know, my partner and I were just having this intimate little ceremony in Perth, and I was living over here at the time, and she was like, would you by any chance fly back and shoot the wedding, or what would that look like to organize that? And I was like full panic mode. I was like, oh, I'm such a fake. I don't know what I'm doing at all.
It's a lie. I'm alive.
I know, fully. But it was so nice having somebody with confidence in me who just liked my work. And I think that's what you always want as a creative, for people that just like you for what you're producing and don't just be like, oh, I like what you're doing, but can you make it like this? You know, it's nice when people give you free reign of just creating what you create.
Yeah, it's pretty tough, I guess, when you're trying to like, when someone actively seeks you for your work, but then they ask you to change your work.
Yeah.
It's like, but aren't you like, it's a weird concept to me.
It is hard, but I think people always see something else that you've done and they're like, oh, gee, I'd love that. And, you know, I say to people all the time, like, somehow people get this mix up in the process. Like, at the end of the day, when you're a photographer, you're taking a photo of what's actually in front of you, like what's actually there. And people are often like, have this idea in mind of being like, oh, and I want it to look like this and I want it to look like this. And I'm like, cool, then you're going to have to shoot at this time of day and it's going to have to like be with this background. It's going to have to be in this setting. And then they're like, oh, I don't have availability to do that. Or, you know, that doesn't really fit in with our theme or whatever. And you're like, well, you're taking a photo of what's actually there. So unless you go to the places where it's actually there, you're not going to get that photo, you know.
We're going to have to move this wedding to Noosa.
Exactly. People are like, oh, I want these dreamy colours and I want it to look like this and I want it to, you know, feel really romantic and dramatic, and I like how, you know, you had these like darker colours or whatever. And I'm like, okay, well then we're going to have to shoot later in the afternoon, you know, when the sun's setting, and we're going to get those like strong oranges and whatever.
Golden hour.
Yeah, exactly. And it's surprised me sometimes when I have to talk people through that concept of being like, I don't know how to tell you this, but I'm just taking the photo of what's actually there. And if it's not actually there, we're not going to get that photo.
Yeah, it's a weird conversation to have, I guess, to like have to educate someone about those things.
Especially on weddings, you know, because they have this idea in mind of like, oh, I want it to be like dramatic and moody.
Pinterest, ruining everyone's life.
And then I'm like, cool, let me map out the day for you. And I'm also going to, you know, like tell you where you should be getting married. And there's times where I've definitely had the opportunity to like take hold of people's weddings, and they're just like, you tell us, what do you think is going to produce the best photos? And I'm like, awesome, let me lay it out for you.
Spain, we're going to Spain.
We're going to Spain. We're actually shooting at sunrise. It's going to be awesome. And that's me, you know, every single time somebody's like, oh, you know, you just do whatever you want. What do you recommend? My first thing is like, okay, cool. Like, I want to shoot when nobody else is around and we have perfect lighting. The only time of day that you're going to get that is at sunrise. So I'll see you at 5 a.m. Tuesday, buddy. You know, get out of bed and we're going to go take some photos.
How does pricing work for photography across the board? I guess because weddings, I've always heard, can be like really expensive. Mm-hmm. And then like normal photography is, I don't know, like average expensive. I'm not, if that even makes sense.
I'm super happy to discuss what I charge as well, but also just how people... Theory. Yeah, in theory. I think the theory with weddings of why they're so expensive, people are like, oh, gee, you know, it's like really costs a lot to be, you know, getting somebody in to shoot a wedding. I think it's similar to like people that are shooting births or whatever. It's like you get one opportunity at that specific time of day, and you got to know where you got to be exactly at that time. You know, you're gonna have the walk down the aisle. Everybody wants photos as she's walking down the aisle, and they want photos of the groom's reaction as she's walking down the aisle. And if you can get both at once, that's amazing. And then you want to get
just
like exactly, and
the
then
Matrix with the guns, just like either side.
Yeah, fully. And then you want to get like, oh, you want the dad's reaction for his little girl and his shedding tears, and then you know the mum's on the other side, and you want her reaction. And it's simply just like, well, you got to have arms everywhere, and you've also got to know what comes next. I think when you're shooting weddings, it's like you've got to know everything that's going to happen and when it's going to happen. And I've been really lucky. I have shot a lot of weddings with friends, and I've had some videographers with me that are good friends of mine, and you know I'll talk to them and I'll be like, oh, pay attention, kiss is coming, and they'll turn around and they're like, how did you know? And I'm like, buddy, like it's the same thing every time, you know, you're gonna have walk down the aisle, vows, kiss, you know, you got to be prepared when they're saying the vows and they're kind of getting to the I do part. Like you got to have a camera ready right in that moment. It's not time to be walking around and sussing out, you know,
the food.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I suppose wedding photography is I love it. I love that you get entrusted to be there on one of the biggest days of somebody's life. That's what I love in photography, is that people trust you with the most important stuff. It's like I always just get like tingles when I think about this, but for me, photography is like I'm entrusted to be the memory keeper. It's like that's a pretty big role. And it's pretty special to be like, okay, I might never have met you before, but you're actually trusting me to capture the beauty of one of the biggest days of your life. Like that's such an honor, and also pretty intense to step into that and be like, oh gosh, okay, I really hope I do it justice, and really hope, you know, I communicate all the feeling out of that day and capture all the moments that were really important to you, you know? Because you're going to be sitting around the fire one day with your grandkids and showing them the photos that I've taken, which is so no pressure. But you're going to be sharing those photos for the rest of your life and talking about that moment for the rest of your life. And in a lot of ways, like those photos are encapsulating that experience for you. You know, you're going to forget maybe what the cake tasted like, or you're going to forget like the little in-between pieces. You're going to forget, you know, the exact flowers you had and all these different little bits and pieces. But sometimes you capture moments, you know, where the most recent wedding that I did, the bride had the most beautiful speech at the end of the night, and her parents were just in tears, and we're having this really beautiful moment. And I caught these photos of that, and you know, I got to see them at the end of the night, and I was like, hey, like that was really magical for me. Like, thanks for trusting me to be here. Like, I'm so passionate, and I'm so grateful that you trust me to be here on one of the biggest days of your life. And you know, the parents like gave me a big hug, and they're like, oh, thanks so much. And they got to see the photos later, and they're like, well, like, oh, we're gonna remember that for the rest of our lives. Like, that was such a special moment. And you get that, you know, throughout the day, and any big events that you get hired to do as a photographer, 21st, whatever else it might be, people remember a lot of that stuff. But also when they see the photos, they're brought back to that moment, and then they're like, oh gosh, remember how we were laughing over that little thing, whatever. You know, it's really beautiful to have that.
It's like crazy, like the way you just unpacked that whole entire day. Would, I hope to someone listening, would give a little bit of clarification as to why you would pay your photographer that kind of money, because not only are you dealing with all of those elements, you then are like dealing with like the skill as well that like the photographer is
so stressful bringing. It's like you get one opportunity to get the right shots, and you get what you get and you miss what you miss, you know, and there's no going back and redoing it again, you know, hopefully. But
that's so bad.
Well, the aim is that you do it once and you do it right. But that's the whole skill, right? Is like knowing what's coming, being able to anticipate the moments, and more than that, being able to capture them. Like, it's hard being a photographer, and I'm shooting, you know, manually, which means all my settings I have to do on the fly. And I'm looking around and I'm like, cool, sun's coming in from this way, which means, you know, my aperture, my ISO, my shutter speed have to be on these settings. And then as soon as I turn around and face the other way, light's coming in from the other direction. I have to change all those things again. And it's like, I'll be shooting a wedding and I'll have my hands, you know, just like moving so fast over the camera, trying to like change everything with every angle, you know. And you're stepping around people and you're moving, and then you got bloody Uncle Billy in the background with his iPhone up and you're trying to dodge that at the same time. Then you got some baby crying, distracting you. And then you're also trying to make sure you're not standing in the way of the mother-in-law and making sure that she's having a good time and actually gets to fully experience, you know, her baby getting married. And you're like, trying to enable all of these people to have the best experience possible and not disrupt any of that, but also capture it perfectly on time. It's flippin' hard, my friend. It's not an easy thing to do, but it's also like the one of the best things you can do as well.
So there you have it, guys. That's why you pay the money.
Pay your photographers generously, my friends. You will not regret.
So I guess like moving away from wedding photography, what would you say would be like a very similar correlation between that kind of photography and portrait photography?
Similar in that I think the best photography of people in general is just candid, actually capturing their genuine emotions in the moment. I think the crossover is always like, you've seen me shoot a few times, you know, on the first time that we met, and other times I think you've come along and watched me, you know, like coordinate models and tell people how to be and try to communicate to them and articulate, you know, the best way to stand, the best way to move. Oftentimes I find myself telling people to do an action and then they're just focusing in on the action rather than about their face or worrying where they put their hands or whatever. And you know, if I'm shooting a clothing label, I might tell the model, you know, I want you to spin around for me, or I want you to like throw your hands in the air. And then they kind of get this little giggle going on because they feel silly about what they're doing. And then it's like, it's not the hands getting thrown in the air, but it's the giggle the second after. And so like in relation to wedding photography, I think general photography and portrait photography is so much more about capturing the moments as they most honestly occur. You know, you get the, whatever you ask them to do, they do, but then the moment after, you know, where they have a little laugh at themselves or, you know, maybe they're like shying away from the camera, all these in-between bits and pieces. It's the same at a wedding where when you've got a camera in somebody's face, they feel all self-conscious and they think about what they're doing and they focus in on their smile. But then a second later, you know, the bride says something beautiful and they relax and they get really empathetic and then they have this beautiful expression on their face and you're really trying to capture that.
Yeah, it's like a weird, like, yeah, it is a weird concept. Like candid photos, it seems to be like the big in thing at the moment.
Yeah, especially when you're telling people how to be. You know, I'll be like, all right, I want you to shimmy your shoulders towards the left and then look out towards my hand and then I want you to lift your chin and then I want you to do this. And they're doing all these things and they're like, oh gosh, where's my chin? You know, and trying to coordinate which side is my left side.
It's actually weird being directed by a photographer to do something if you've never done it before, like if you're trying to model.
Oh my gosh, people always have this moment. I love working with people that have never had a camera in their face before and they have never had somebody tell them what to do. And then suddenly you're like, cool, I want your left hand leaning on so-and-so's shoulder and I want your right hand to just be like casually laying on, you know, next to you. And then they're like, oh gosh, which, and they're like staring at their hands like left, right, what? I've never heard those words before, you know, and they're going to like do the math and try to figure it out.
Yeah, like they're like, all right, well, I want you to look up here, but you're like, it feels awkward for your like face to be like pointing in a weird direction.
Yeah, and sometimes you're like, just trust me, and then other times you're like, you're obviously uncomfortable. You need to stop what you're doing. You just need to do what's normal to you. It's a fine balance.
What's like the interaction between a model and a photographer in terms of, have you ever dealt with some I would assume would know exactly what they're doing.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Like, it'd make it very hard if they've never done it before.
It's really crazy because I used to really shoot only with friends and people that had never modeled before. And then I did this one shoot for this clothing label and they had like professional models that they'd hired in. And I was like, oh my gosh, somebody who actually knows what their face looks like. Like, what an absurd concept, you know? You don't sit in front of the mirror all day and see yourself and know exactly what angle your chin looks best on. But then you get a model and they do and you're like, oh my gosh, that's so nice that you know exactly how you look and you know your best moves and you've seen yourself 100 times, you know, in photos and posters and whatever, and you already know what to do. And that's so lovely to get that. But then also it's nice to have people that have never done it before, and then they're just like a lot more genuine, and they're moving a lot more naturally as well. So
Yeah, it seems like it takes a lot to find the angle that works best for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And then kind of figuring out people's stuff, I guess. Like, people will be self-conscious about different things, and it really comes through the photos. You know, somebody might have a scar on their chin just on their left side, and then you notice them always, you know, putting their hand up against their face or doing some kind of action, and then you kind of catch on to these moments where you're like, oh, you're self-conscious of that thing. Like, cool, we're going to swap you around, and so I'm only ever looking at your other side, and then you can kind of relax into it more.
I want to get a model on to talk about the opposite end
I
of
would
being on the
love
camera
that,
to see
yeah.
what their thought process is.
I want to be here for that, and I'm going to have a little commentary running in the back of being like, oh, that's what I need to do better.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see what they're...
Definitely.
Why... Because it's such a random... Like, for modelling, it's such a weird concept, right? Someone's taking a photo of you and paying you money. For you
And
to
also,
stand in front
like,
of a camera.
I feel like models would get told all the time the same thing, you know? It's like in your own life, you always get told pretty similar stuff that you need to work on. For me, I'm always getting told, like, you're doing it too fast. If you want to learn something, you need to slow right down. I'm just a fast-paced person. But I can imagine in modeling it'd be, like, a lot more physical or literal, you know? Like, people would be like, oh, your chin looks weird, or your ear on that side, or you got to put your hair this way, or your shoulders, relax your shoulders down. You know, if they're getting told that 100 times, they just know to do that after a while.
Yeah, it'd be really cool to go to like a photo shoot and see a model, like a professional model who does it all the time.
Yeah.
Just see how they work.
Yeah.
Because
And the things that I would love to hear, like, what's the most predominant thing on your mind? You know, are you always conscious of your shoulders or your hips? Or are you worried about your posture?
how you think? Yeah.
Yeah.
Professional models listening to this right now, hit me up. Let's get you on.
Please.
I did put a post out, and then I never got much back.
Yeah.
But that's all right. I'll just get a Victoria's Secret model on.
Yeah, obviously.
That's obviously
One of your
next.
friends.
That's obviously the next thing.
Obviously. They're
One
probably
day-
coming to you, mate.
One day they will be on
They
here.
will be. They will
Serious.
be.
And I'll be taking
I don't
this.
even think it would take that long.
I think my whole concept of this is to take it like worldwide and have like all these different cool people come on.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be crazy to think that one day there would be like a Victoria's Secret model sitting there telling me.
I don't even think it's that far from you, man. I bet there's like 3 people on the Sunshine Coast that have been Victoria's Secret models, or, you know, like been involved or whatever that could get you to somebody. Like, there's people, what do they say? Like, it's
not what you know, it's who you know.
Yeah, fully, but there's going to be somebody that gets you in there. There's famous people that live on the coast. Like, we're in Noosa. Like, Chris Hemsworth is surfing on the weekends up here. It's
Was
like,
he? Good old Chrissy.
oh, good old Chrissy.
Good old Chrissy.
Well, you know, and there's
Yeah,
like
it
always
is,
some
yeah.
famous people cruising around Noosa.
It is actually like a very, like after moving here, I didn't realize how many people, like famous people are here.
Mm-hmm.
Or not even,
Or just have a
or
house
just like
here.
someone knows of someone. Like there's very, like, I don't even know, like there's very well-connected people living
Definitely,
on the
and there's some
Sunshine
people
Coast.
that just like live locally that are huge names. You know, it's like you go down to Byron Bay and it's like Matt Corby lives down there. You come up here, like Ziggy Alberts is up here, and you have like all these different characters that
Yeah,
are
like
just
Xavier
cruising
Rudd.
around.
He lives
Xavier Rudd's around here, man. Like Black Rock Band. You go to Perth, there's like 1 million people. There's people everywhere that are doing crazy shit that you can get involved with.
Yeah,
Your Victoria's Secret model, I reckon, is a couple of phone calls away, my friend.
come on, the show. No.
Yeah, exactly. If you're out there and you're listening,
So let's go back a little bit.
bring it back in.
I feel like that was a good little segment. But I'd like to go back a little bit deeper. When you first started taking photos, what was your first camera?
An Olympus OM10. My first film camera. My first digital camera prior to that was a Canon 750D, which I only just parted with like in the last couple of months. I was using that right up until recently. I had that since I was like 15, 16.
And how would you say, what's the difference between that 750D and the new camera that you use?
Oh, the new camera that I use is like a professional camera. Made for real grown-ups that know what they're doing. But Not that I even know what I'm doing, to be honest. But the 750D was awesome. Like, it definitely got the job done, but it was super slow and it wasn't made to be fast and in the moment. And then, when you, like I said, when you're at a wedding, it's like you need to capture 10 things at once in order and in the moment. And you're only going to get that genuine reaction out of that person in that moment one time. And you need to be ready for that. And the 750D was just very slow, and then also I just couldn't get the desired results that I wanted and time frame. It's like anything. You just start at a base level and then you work your way up to something a little bit more sophisticated.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept. Like, you can go from, some people I find will just buy the best camera straight away.
Yeah, and then not know what to do with it and just think that the camera does all the work. I don't know. It's such an interesting thing because I've seen some incredible photographers shoot on some really awful cameras. And I've seen some like really awful photographers shoot on some really amazing cameras. And you're like, wow, okay. There is definitely a balance between skill set and equipment.
A good friend of mine from back home, he told me, he's like, it's not the camera, it's the photographer. I was like, I never really grasped that concept till I started taking photos. And I was like, oh, you don't need, like, you could literally have a $200 camera.
And so much is like, what do you want out of your photo? I think for anybody doing anything, you have to actually realize that at some point in life, like, you are the only person determining what you actually value. And you're the person who has to live with the consequences of what you actually value. And if you're like trying to fit in or trying to like get the right stuff all the time and you're not actually just honest to like, oh, I just like this, I feel like that's part of it as well, is like realizing, oh, I really like this. I really like how it looks. I really like achieving this result. And I really like working with people that like that as well. And then the more like authentic you are to that relationship between what you actually want and what you actually want to achieve and what you have in front of you, you're going to start attracting so many more people that like your stuff genuinely, And that's like, I feel like that's the goal at the end of the day, is if you know yourself, you know what you shoot, you know what you want. And then people are like, oh, I love what you do. I love that style. I want that, That's like, it's the gravy, That's the goods.
Baby.
Absolutely.
How did you handle the business side of things, I guess?
Dude, I do not know how to handle any kind of business. I'm a fake adult. So happy to admit that publicly. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just trying.
What are some of the biggest lessons you've learnt from trying to move full-time into photography?
Be confident. Reach out to people. Man, the amount of times that I've had these like beautiful little connections where it's just like, somebody that I've hung out with one time and they saw my stuff that one time and then they followed me and it's gone on to produce something else. That, like, you can't minimize those small interactions. I think that that's a really big deal, is like every little conversation you have and every time somebody like, follows your page or starts consuming your work or sees it for one time, like that thought lingers to them. And again, you're just kind of bringing in people that are really attracted to your work and can encourage you to be more of yourself and produce more of what you naturally produce. I think that's the goal. Business side, like actual how to run a business, I feel like, I don't know, the first thing, in fact, I'll go to my boyfriend every day and be like, what is taxes? I haven't paid them. I don't know what I do. Who do I go to about taxes? I don't know what to do. Alex is amazing and he definitely just helps me be an adult.
Well, I guess leading into that, you do live in a van. So
I live in a van. I'm an absolute, I didn't sign up to adulthood.
What drove you to live in a van?
The van literally drove me. So we went.
Wow.
Wow. Okay, so you've interviewed Alex before, so you know my boyfriend, Alex McKigney. Wonderful man. It's actually our anniversary today.
I know, and you're here doing this with me. Great.
It makes the most sense to be here with you on my anniversary.
We're drinking wine together. We're sharing wine.
Because I started out, what was it, yesterday that I saw you, and we started out our plans for our anniversary by seeing you, and then it just makes perfect sense that we always see you.
I'm the rock.
Yeah, this guy was there for one of our first dates, and Jesse's been there since.
I just seen him pop up.
The start. Yeah, it's so funny. Sorry. So Alex is very tied down to Noosa, to the greater Noosa region. He has a restaurant in Noosa. And since we got together, when we first met, I actually had a full game plan that I was going to move up to Cairns and live with my friend up in Cairns. And I didn't actually have any anticipation to spend much time here on the coast. I just thought that I'd be popping in, making some money and heading off again. And since meeting Alex, like in a lot of ways, it's like tied me to one area, which is probably really good for me. But also, we had a agreement that like I really wanted to travel and he had to really knuckle down and be here. And so when I turned 24, which was in March, I was like, Alex, one thing on my bucket list is that I want to live in a van for a significant period of time. Hopefully I can make it to a year. But I don't really see a better time to do that than now. You know, Alex came back to me and he was like, are we breaking up? And I was like, no. I just want to live in a van.
Cool.
And he was like, wait, are we breaking up? And I was like, no. I just want to live in a van. And it was on my bucket list. And while, you know, we're pretty committed here to be on the coast for a while, I was like, okay, now it feels like the time to do it, you know? Like, only really responsible from myself. Like our lives are still quite separate. Like we run on different schedules during the week, and now feels like a really good time to do this. And also I decided when I was a kid that 24 was going to be the best year of my life. And I was like, I'm going to start out this year by doing something I really want to do, which is living in the van. So naturally the first night that I spent in the van, it was awful weather. And it was like 2 a.m. I was like, I have to pee. And I'm like getting out of the van and it's like raining. There's like thunderstorms outside and I'm just getting absolutely saturated. And it was so loud. Like all the rain on the van was so loud. I could not get any sleep. So of course, like I came in with my like tail between my legs at like 3 a.m. and from Alex's perspective, he's like, and then this demon appeared in my room. And I'm like standing in the doorway like a wet rat, just being like, please let me back. So van life has been awesome, but it's also been really hectic. And I've been doing that since March full time, struggling it out day to day.
Yeah, I remember when I travelled Australia in a van, the concept of like being able to just go wherever you want. It's an interesting concept, I guess, because
it's just as good as it is terrible.
Yeah. But I think it also leads into like a lot of like you as a person living in a van as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, some people would look at it as like living in a van is like a fear of commitment. To like to like committing to something.
Oh, I definitely have a fear of commitment to like everything in life.
Because I lived in a van. Even I kind of want to move back into a van.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but then there's so many other different aspects to like why you would want to live in a van. Like if you want to save money but I think the van life movement, it's been going on for a few years now, but it seems to be stronger than ever.
Oh, everybody comes up to me and, you know, they see me like either get out of my van, and my van's like, it's relatively discreet, but it has a platform on the roof, you know, it's got a little water tank on it, and people are like, oh, gee, are you living in your van? You know, I'm like, yeah, I am. And they're like, oh, how's that? I really want to do that. You know, it sounds so cool. And I'm like, man, it's great until it's 3 a.m. and it's raining outside and you got to pee. Up until then, it's awesome. And I wake up in these beautiful places and I feel like I start out my day, I do like a breathing session, I stretch in the mornings, and I usually try to park by water. So I'll like either park at a lake or near the beach or whatever. And the first thing I do, you know, when I'm living in my van, the first thing I do in the morning is go swimming every day, no matter how cold it is. And it's like, I really like the idea of setting up your life so that you have the most passive route to consume everything you want to consume. I think it's really good for you to swim every day, especially when it's cold, you know, all the Wim Hof and like the cold water and all that jazz. I'm so into that. I'm super into it.
Wim Hof, right?
Yeah, 100%. Let's lie down right now and do some breathing. No, I get myself involved and I love it. And I really like living in the van. It just gives me this really direct avenue to like, if I want to shower today, I need to jump into the ocean so that I get out and rinse off in a shower. Otherwise, I'm going to be the smelliest person in the room for the rest of the day, and I'd definitely rather swim than be that person. So
yeah, winter's a tough concept for living in a van. Like, because even the showers are cold. Like, it's cold the whole time.
Man, I got out of the beach the other day and some old man came up to me and he was like, oh, how was the water? And I was like, dude, the water was beautiful. It's the shower that's cold.
The water's fine.
The water's lovely, especially here on the Sunshine Coast. You know, like I spent most of 2020 in Perth and a bit of 2021. And I was with this group called Cold Nips, and they go out every Wednesday morning at sunrise and they swim every single week.
Really?
Yeah, and it's huge. You know, there'll be like 200, 300 people that go to this.
Where is this?
In Perth. Oh. It's a massive event. You guys should all check it out if you ever go there. Cold Nips, super cool group of people. But they go out like every Wednesday morning. They're so dedicated. In summer, you'll get like 300-400 people. Like, it's huge. And then in winter, there's like 20 people. And it's so cold over there, so much colder than it is over here. And I feel like I'm always, you know, saying to myself, Case, if you can't swim, you know, over here, you're not going to make it in Perth and you're not that weak. You can do this. It's funny, even at work, when somebody pulls out a camera and is like, can we get a photo for our Facebook page? I'm like, yeah, legally speaking, you can't actually make me do that. I won't be in this photo. Thank you. But I'm super happy to take the photo. So happy to take the photo. Greg's always like, are you a photographer outside here? And I'm like, yeah. And I kind of planned out my whole life so that I don't have to be in photos. So if you can just let me have that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Why is that? Why don't you want to be in photos?
Oh, I don't know. I'm just not about it. I like taking the photo.
Yeah.
It's probably, I don't know, maybe it's insecurity, but then like if the right person comes along, you know, I've worked with some amazing photographers that are like, all right, Case, you're in this one. And I'm like, all right, cool. I feel great. Let's do it.
Yeah, see, I think you're a good model. Like,
such a very attractive. I get that a lot.
Because I was like, I'm not really a photogenic person. I always found it really hard to
you did great.
be in front of photos.
A great model.
But then recently, I'm like, no, I really want to be in front of the camera, and like, because normally I'm always behind the camera.
Yeah.
So it's only of late that I've started to be like, no, I want people to actually take photos of me and like.
Yeah, probably with the podcast, right? It's like people.
Yeah, like you're trying to like build the brand and like put a face to the brand and things.
And
people
are so much more involved with the face as well. I find, especially as a photographer, people are like so much more involved with your personality. You know, they love the photos, but then to get involved with the person behind it feels like such a connection and.
Yeah, definitely.
And you can also let down your barriers. You know, people are a lot more vulnerable. They're a lot more honest. They're a lot more willing to do things, you know.
Yeah, how do you get, like, people to loosen up in a photo shoot?
My philosophy, so glad you asked this question. My
I've been waiting for this question all day. If I'm the
weirdest person in the room, everyone else can relax. If I'm, like, the most outrageous character and I can be just loud and silly and fun and... You know, if I can crack jokes and make myself look like a weirdo and then people are just like, oh, cool, Case is doing it. I can't possibly be worse than that. Yeah, I'm like so happy to just be myself now.
It's like especially if you're getting people like naked.
Oh,
the naked shoot is always one that I'm always like, how does this work? Like,
it's so fun. You know what's crazy is like I did this shoot maybe like 6-12 months ago now where I got this group of women and I just did a shout out on Instagram and I was like, hey guys, anybody that's interested, I'm looking to do a bit of a raunchy shoot. I'm looking for like 5-6 ladies, women only. It's going to be on the beach. Whoever's interested, get involved. Just reply to this message. I had like 6-7 girls be like, I really want to come. I want to do this. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Wow, that was a great response. You know, I thought maybe 1 or 2 would be like, I'm going to face my insecurities and I really want to do this. But girls were like, oh man, I've been waiting.
The alpha. I'm here. I'm getting my kid out.
You know what was so funny? So we did this shoot at like 5 a.m. You know, I always shoot when there's like hopefully nobody around. And of course, you know, if you want an empty beach, it's not going to happen at sunset. But you get way less people at sunrise. And so I took this group of girls to the beach and I was like, okay, ladies, like, so I have this idea and I'm like talking them through the concepts that I want to do and how I want to shoot or whatever. And I turn around and one of the girls is already naked. She's ready. And she's like, all right, where do you want me to stand? What do you want me to do? Like, you want boobs in, boobs out? I was like, all right. And then all these girls, you know, start giggling when they realize this one girl's already taken off her clothes and they're like, I'll do it too. And I was like, all right, guys, whatever you feel comfortable with. All of a sudden, this group of women are naked in front of me and I was like, this isn't even my thing anymore. It's like, they've just been waiting for this moment. But I do say a lot of time, you know, I'm really lucky. I get away with so much as a woman because I'm the female photographer. I feel like there's so many shoots where, you know, I've shot with plenty of men before that are like, oh, hey, how do you feel about this? You know, do you mind like if you were to have like an open t-shirt and we don't need to see anything, but you know, maybe like aren't wearing a bra or whatever. And I'm like, oh yeah, whatever. And then I'll have people that are like, you know, I'll be shooting with girls and there might be a male photographer present and the girls are like all insecure and awkward and they cover up and whatever. But when it's just me, girls are just like, you have it, you've seen it, it's not new, let's go, I'm naked now. And it's like, all right, this is what we're doing.
I had a chat to, when I had Sam on, like Fat Dog.
Yeah.
She was talking, because she did some like nude shoots with Warwick Gow. And he's a guy. And he takes...
Have you had him on?
No, not yet.
Oh, I haven't met him, but I love his photos.
He takes a lot of nude photos of chicks.
Yeah, some crazy shit.
I'm like interested to see how that works.
But I think over time, if you establish who you are and what you do, like I said,
I think it's just a concept at the start that people are like, oh, this could be creepy. But I feel like if you're a professional photographer, you're not giving off that vibe of being creepy. You're just like, hey, this is the concept. Get naked. Let's sort this. Like, you're not even really giving them the thought process that you're like, that's what it is. Like,
I do know a couple of photographers that predominantly shoot nude or like more raunchy, spicy stuff. And I've met some of those guys and shot with some of those guys and I feel really uncomfortable and I'm like, this is not good for me. I've also shot with people that I'm like, I feel so comfortable. I think it's so much in your approach and how you communicate things as well. And also the style of photography that you do. I think most models know what they're in for when they step in because they've already sussed out your stuff. I think Warwick, you know, his stuff is amazing. I'm such a fan. I don't know if you listen to this, but I love your stuff. Such a fan. But his stuff is really cool. And every time I see his stuff, I'm like, oh yeah, how do you get away with that? You know, like how are you convincing girls or guys to do that and feel comfortable enough to get that, you know, out of them? But I think a lot of it is in, your approach and like your style. I've had a lot of people say to me like, hey, I really love like how your nude photography isn't sexualized. They're like, it's really crazy that you can seem to separate the two, but your nude photography isn't like sexualizing a person. It's just like kind of encapsulating like femininity or whatever. I feel like that's such a nice compliment to get.
Yeah, it's a good way. If you can, I feel like it's such an art to be able to like separate the two.
And I probably don't do it all the time, but it is nice to hear that people feel like there is a space there for separation.
Yeah, I guess. Because I remember when you and I and Alex were talking about doing like, you were talking about a concept and we had to be naked and there was no hesitation. I feel
Jesse's like, you want me to take my clothes off right now? I'll do it right now.
Alex and I were like, yeah, right. She's like, yeah, but you guys are going to be like getting real close. We're like, yeah, that's cool.
Like, but it's funny, people are sometimes just so emotionally prepared for that. They're just like, yeah, cool, I'm sold. I'm down for the cause. Especially I find when it's with other people. If they're isolated, they're a lot more like, ooh, it's just somebody staring at me. I'm putting a camera on my junk. But if it's like, well, me and my buddies just doing some weird shit on a Tuesday. Like, that's fine.
That was literally the thought process that went through my mind. I was like,
it's Alex.
Me and Alex getting naked.
Yeah, we knew it was going to get weird eventually. Might as well face it now.
We were just accepting the inevitable.
Yeah, fully. Oh, so many people are like that though. And then some people, it's funny, sometimes I go into shoots and it might be like, you know, a clothing label or somebody just wants some personal portraits of themselves where they feel good about themselves. And I've done that a bunch of times for friends, you know, and they might hit me up and be like, hey, it's my birthday. I want to do something kind of quirky. And then I'll catch up with them and they're like, I want to get naked and I want you to make me look good. Let's go. And I'm like, right. Yes, sir. All right, let's do it.
Is there any photographer that you kind of look up to? I guess I don't really ask this question much. I feel like it's a cliche. I can't even get my words out now. A cliche question. But is there any photographer that you've admired growing up that you've kind of not like imitated their work, but you've taken elements of their work to like maybe using concepts in your photography?
Yeah, you know what's so interesting, Jesse? Like I don't know why, but me and myself, like, stop touching the wire. It's messing me up.
Is that your wire or my wire?
Yeah, I don't know. My brain cells, though, are just
that's my wire. Your wire's over here.
I can't hear myself anymore. It's just gone now.
What do you mean you can't hear
it's
yourself?
back. It's back. See? You just got to not touch it. Maybe.
You should be able to hear yourself.
Sorry.
That's the wrong wire anyway. This wires for my mic.
Okay.
Having some
Throw me
technical
off.
difficulties here.
Anyway,
I'll hold this wire instead.
your question, Jesse. Are there any photographers that I admire or look up to? Growing up, I really looked up to a lot of people. Over my adult life, I feel like as a photographer and as a person, I've realized I'm super insecure. And it's kind of nice having that realization in yourself. I've got a lot of boundaries around my Instagram these days. So if I don't follow you, it's not personal. But if I'm intimidated by somebody's work and I feel like I can't achieve work where I'm like, oh gosh, it's so good, but it's not as good as that person, or oh, they would have done it so much better than me. If I feel that in any way, shape, or form, I do not follow that person at all. I don't follow their work. If I'm intimidated or it makes me pursue what I want to pursue less, I don't follow it at all. People that have really different styles to me, where I can admire their work and I don't want to become them, and I don't feel like they are similar to me, I can definitely follow their stuff and consume it and be really inspired by it and really enjoy it. But people that are really quite aligned to my style, that I'm really intimidated by, I'm like, well, nah, just don't look at it at all, because it will make me feel discouraged to produce what I want to produce. In saying that, when I was growing up, there's two specific photographers that I was like, yeah, I guess I had that since I was been a teenager. I didn't really follow people that I felt like discouraged me from producing things, but I would only really follow people that inspired me. And so Jared Sang is a really incredible Perth-based photographer, and Alex Cohen, likewise, she is phenomenal. And you know what? I was so lucky in the year 2020. I got stuck in Perth after trying to move to Germany, and I went to Cold Nips one morning, went to go for that cold, I know Cold Nips gets you every time. I went for a swim this one morning. And yeah, 100%, that's what she said. And I actually saw Alex Cohen in the crowd, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's Alex Cohen. I love her stuff. And I've been following her work since, I kid you not, since I was like 13. I've been like a huge admirer of her photography. And I saw her in this crowd, and I literally made like this beeline towards her. And then I was like probably 3 meters away, and one of my friends walked up to her and was like, oh my gosh, are you Alex Cohen? You're amazing. I love your photography. And I was like, oh, loser. And turned back around like I wasn't about to do the exact same thing. And anyway, I went for my swim, and I came out of the ocean, and I saw her standing there, and I went over to her, and I was like, hi, are you Alex Cohen? And she was like, yeah, I am. And I was like, hey,
I love your work.
well, yeah, I tried to be really cool. I was like, hey, I'm a big fan of your stuff. Like, you're a really beautiful photographer. Cool. And I tried to be so cool, but I was like, hey, is there any chance you like, what are you doing now? Do you want to go get coffee? And then turns out one of my really good friends, he was already friends with her, and like he knew that I was a huge fan of her work and had been following her for ages. And he ended up being like, okay, so I'm just going to go get coffee with this friend of mine. You want to come join us? And I was like, sure. And I went and got coffee with them, and I rocked up to this cafe, and he was sitting there with her, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's happening. I'm going to meet Alex Cohen today. Ah! And I went and sat down at this table, and she started telling all these beautiful stories about her life, and I was just like so captivated by her character. And man, she's just such an embodiment of femininity, and like I think she's just been such a beautiful what's the word, like landmark to me, of like somebody that can really encapsulate like the feminine character and also like produce so much emotion in her work. It's really authentic. It's not always sexualized, but she really beautifully captures I guess the essence of like what's really there, and so much character and so much emotion. And anyway, I love her stuff. And so we ended up becoming friends, right, after this coffee. And then a couple of weeks later, like we caught up again, and I was just happened to be in the right place at the right time, and we became friends. And then one day she was like, hey, my second shooter bailed on me. Do you want to come shoot a wedding with me? And I was like, oh yeah, cool, yeah, whatever. I guess I'll probably be free this weekend. And in my mind, I was like, I will throw away every plan I've ever had to come spend time with you. And I was so excited to shoot with her. And I shot 2 or 3 weddings with her. And I was like, oh, man. She is so generous as well in, I can't say enough good things about her. But she was so generous in, like, teaching me in that time. And then I came back from Perth and came back to the sunny coast. And around that time, I also met Jared Sang, who was friends with her. And he as well, like I've been following his work since I was like 13. It was crazy because, man, like, not to like name drop or whatever, but he shot with like Jimmy Barnes World Tour is like sponsored by Canon, sponsored by Qantas, like it does crazy big stuff all the time, you know. He's killing it and has been, you know, as long as I knew what a photographer was. And one day Alex is like, you know, her and I are sitting in this coffee shop and we're just having lunch, and she's like, hey, do you mind if I invite my friend Jared? And I was like, girl, you know I'm a really big fan of Jared Singh, and if you're telling me Jared Singh is about to join us for lunch, I'm about to lose my shit. And unlike when I met her, Jared Singh walked into this cafe and I was like, I was dressed like a 12-year-old boy, which is kind of just who I am, you know. I always dress like a kid. And I saw him and I was like, hey man, I'm not even going to play it cool. I'm a huge fan of you. I love your stuff. I'm such a fan. I can't believe I'm meeting you in the flesh right now. I was like, can I shake your hand? Would that be cool? And then I was not cool at all, and I just lost my mind. I was like, I love you.
It's not chill. No chill.
But he was awesome, and then he ended up shooting me this message, and he was like, hey, you know, I'm cruising around for you. Did you want to catch up for a coffee? And I was like, yes, absolutely. And we ended up catching up and talking. He was like, hey, I just like your energy, and, you know, you're cool, and I've seen some of your stuff. Your stuff's really great. Like, let's hang out. And we ended up becoming great friends. And then he came over here to shoot like Angus and Julie Stone's one of their album releases, and we ended up catching up in Brisbane, and I was just like, we got to shoot together. And man, there's just this beautiful like full circle when you meet somebody that you're like, dude, when I got into this, it was really only those two names that I was so like motivated by. And there's so many good photographers out there. Like there's so many amazing photographers. But for me, I was just like, these are two people that are in their own lane. I don't feel like I'm conflicting with them. I just feel like I'm really inspired by their work, and it's different, but it's beautiful. And both of them were just so kind and generous to me, and just like took me under their wing and taught me so much stuff. And, you know, these days there's so many beautiful photographers. Rob Woodcocks is like, I think he's American, but his stuff is beautiful. There's a couple of others that I follow on my Instagram that are just like, they're just doing weird shit, and I really like that. Like I like consuming art where I'm staring at their photo for a while and I'm like, what is that? What is that? You know? And I'm like captivated. I think anybody that makes you look at something for a bit longer and steals your attention and just like captivates you, I'm like, whoa, what a skill set, you know?
I think about as a American photographer, film photographer called Joe Greer. Greer, I'm pretty sure it's Greer, and he does street photography.
Sorry, I'm just trying to find my phone so that I can like find these really cool photographers that I love.
Anyway, and yeah, and he's like got this really crazy like he just captures like these moments in the street, and like street photography for me is like one of my favorites.
Yeah,
it's just crazy to like.
It is beautiful.
Like see these moments captured, and it's like in their raw form.
I'll show you one. This is Ophelia. I can't even pronounce her name. Felicitas Schwazano, based in Hamburg. Her stuff's amazing. I feel like every time I look at one of her photos, there's nothing to feel like uncomfortable about. She's not taking photos of anything weird, but every photo makes you feel uncomfortable and like makes you feel really like, oh gosh, what is that? You know? Yeah,
it's different, hey.
Yeah, it makes you like stare a little bit longer, and it's nothing provocative or crazy, but it makes you feel, even though you're like, I don't even really know what I'm looking at right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so crazy. Beautiful.
I wanted to ask, because this is interesting.
By all means. You ask me.
What is like, this is something I ponder on all the time, right?
I'm just going to keep scrolling so I can find these other cool photographers, but you ask me your questions.
Yeah, when you like the whole concept about not being allowed to be excited to meet someone, like trying to act cool about something.
Yeah.
Like why do we as humans try to just act cool? It's like, why can't we just be our authentic self and be genuinely excited to meet someone? It's like, is it like the fear of someone just going like, oh dude, you're too much. And then, or like the fear of rejection or something. Like, I don't know what it is, but
there's definitely a portion of that. I think everything just comes back to like pride or insecurity, and both of those are so closely intertwined. But it's like anything, you know, you want to kind of feel like you're on the same level as somebody, and to put yourself beneath them is intimidating and uncomfortable in so many ways.
Well, that's the whole point of this podcast. Wow.
You're doing great.
You're doing so
You're
good.
doing so good.
Like the whole point of the podcast is to like
Yes.
bring people to like a human level.
I just found this other sorry to just
This is
jump in
gonna
there.
just distract me.
This is Ben Zank. Ben Zank. Ugh, anybody that can follow him, you should, because he's just doing weird stuff that makes you like, but I love it. I love stuff that just makes you stare at it and you're like, what the heck did he do to get that shot?
Yeah, that is weird.
And it just makes you like, oh, it's so consuming. I could stare at his page all day. Stuff's amazing. And I think there's like one other one somewhere down the line. I only follow like 100 people on my second Instagram. So funny. I've divided I have two Instagrams. I have one called Grandma's Basement, which is like my film name. And one day we'll be a film lab and do many film things. At the moment, it's just my film photos on this page. And then my other photo is myself, Casey Skilbeck Photography. But on Grandma's Basement, I only follow people that I really want to consume their stuff or like keep tabs on it. And people will see that and they'll see my search page and they're like, wow, your search page is so beautiful on your Instagram. And I'm like, I've cultivated this page like, you know, an old man cultivating the perfect hedge. Like,
I've got the algorithm.
I've got the algorithm. And I have just the most beautiful art that comes up on this page. And I only really follow people that I actually really want to see their stuff and get really inspired by it. But there's not much on there, but it's really nice to go in and be like, instantly I have 10 new ideas or whatever. Yeah. That's so good.
Yeah, Instagram is an interesting one. But what is like, for me right now, something that I'm like trying to deal with is like trying to progress the podcast to make it bigger and like get more reach to people. Do you ever feel like when you're dealing with your projects that is something that you're like, is this moving too slow or is this not moving fast enough?
Yeah, it's so easy to be insecure about that, hey, because I feel like everything is just like, well, the wider the audience that you reach, the more money can be made, the more influence you can have, the more this, that, and the other you can have. And yeah, it's super easy to want to reach a bigger audience. But also, I think one of the most important values to myself just as a human being is to have integrity. I like the idea that I can grow things from the ground up and that every person that follows my Instagram, I have some kind of relationship with them, that there's only, you know, maybe one person between us that might have introduced them to my page. And as much as I'm like, I would love to have 100,000 followers or whatever and have people that just consume my work and give me an opportunity to be a full-time photographer and people that are constantly consuming, I'd love that. But I also like the idea that I have a genuine connection with every person that follows my page and that I feel as though any of them were to introduce themselves to me or, you know, I might meet them, that there's not much divide or not much space between us. I think that's nice to have that. That's what I like about the whole podcast for me is that it's very small and niche at the moment. Yeah, and you're just reaching like the people that you care about, you know?
It's
you're
really
not
weird.
Trying to impress a bunch of people you don't even know.
No, well, that's it. It's like I honestly feel like the traction that this has gained so far has been through like people just going, hey, this is this podcast. Hey, have you listened to this? Or someone's come on the podcast and some of their friends have seen it, so they followed and so on and so forth. But yeah, I've had really nice responses from people, and it's actually quite a weird concept when someone gives you a compliment about your work, because I don't know what it is with society or like feeling like nothing is ever good enough. Maybe not everyone feels like this, but I personally do. Like when you're striving to make a project something complete and like you're like, oh, I really want to do well, I think you get caught up in this whole thing like everyone is looking at me going, that's shit. Like this is what I personally do. So then when someone does give you a compliment, you're like, oh no, people actually genuinely are enjoying this project.
Dude, I'm so proud of you. I feel like I met you, you know, before this started, before it was even a concept.
We met like 12 months prior to this.
Yeah, and then to actually see it come to life, man, I'm super impressed by what you're doing. And I think just so much of people love passionate people. I love when I get invited to take photos of people that are just doing their thing. You know, I've got friends in bands and friends that are doing amazing stuff, and I got, you know, friends that are successful in their own areas of life, but people that are just kind of starting up or just kind of like really loving what they're doing, and they're like, hey, will you come take photos? You know, like the concept always stands that people only really ask for photos to be taken of something that they prize. You know, to take photos of their job, you know, their dream that they're going forward in. Most of the time when I shoot for people, it's like the beginning of their business, or maybe their business is evolving, or, you know, they're just releasing their first set of something and they need to market it well, or it's their wedding, or they've just had a baby that's been born. Like photography, you get invited into the most exciting and important parts of people's lives. Like what a privilege that is. I feel so lucky to be doing this. But more than that, you know, like people are just doing what they're passionate about. It's so easy to get excited about what other people are excited about. Just that energy.
Yeah.
I feel like it's so contagious.
Yeah, it's cool. Like it makes me like want to go out and just be like, oh, sweet. Like,
I think even talking to you, you know, some days you come in and you're like, dude, I had 25 people watch my video. I'm killing it. And I'm like the craziest, yes, Jesse, that's so thing. Good.
It's like one of the clips that I put up recently had like 2,600 views.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I've made it. Yay! This is it. Like,
I know. I think I posted my first reel. I got like 5,000 views and I was like, I am killing it. And then the next one got like 100 views and I was like, dang. That's okay. I'm still excited about it.
Still nailed it.
I know. And I love, like, I really try to back myself. I feel like if nobody else is, I want to be like, little Casey, I'm proud of you for pursuing what you love. And I'm proud of you for, like, just taking the photos of the things that you're interested in. And I feel like if the second that I give up on myself and I'm not actually proud of what I'm creating, or not proud of at least what I'm pursuing, I've lost, you know? If I'm proud of where I'm actually angling myself as a person, progressing in this life, in knowledge and creativity, and just taking on challenges that are new, like as long as I'm proud of myself, feel like that's all that matters to me. I'm just like, girl, you're killing it. Who cares what anybody else says? Like, I like your work. It's just me having a conversation with myself internally.
That was fierce. There's one thing I don't know if someone told me or I read it or something, or maybe I saw an interview. It was like, be your own inspiration. And I didn't really understand the concept until I started doing the podcast. Like after every episode, I'm always more inspired to do more.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's so weird. Like, because usually, like when I used to do creative projects, I'd leave operating on this higher frequency and be really, really excited, but it would be so temporary and so short. But for some reason, every time I speak to like you or whoever it may be, I always get so excited and it lasts for so long.
That's
like it's
so
this
nice.
really like cool.
But that's it. People motivate other people. You know, you hear about what somebody else is doing and you're like, oh gosh, that sounds so fun. And, you know, and they're pumped, and then it's making you pumped up for whatever they're doing. It's probably really nice that it's self-perpetuating like that. It keeps you motivated. Yeah,
it's bizarre. It's like weird how this whole thing goes. Like even now, like I'm coming up to 20, what's this episode? Like 25?
Wow, cool.
Something like that, I think.
Yeah.
But even like behind the scenes with like merch and stuff, I'm like about to design some merch.
Are you? Really?
Well, actually, sorry, I have designed merch, but it's going to be like fashion label style, not like your traditional style of merch. Yeah. It's only going to be like a limited run. Very like well thought.
I don't know what it is, but I'm like, I'm buying all of it. One of everything.
Yeah, literally. It's only going to be like one, like really limited run. It's all handmade, all like really high quality stuff. So the whole concept is to like have fashion label, like high end clothes, but like in merch under like this whole podcast brand. I think that's something like a cool concept to do. Super cool. So for anyone listening, that's coming out very, very soon.
Clothing dropping soon.
Dropping soon.
Yeah, cool.
But yeah, I think what the last thing you said really kind of, if I was listening, I'd be very excited.
Okay.
So I don't really need to push this too much further, I don't think. I'm very happy with how far we've come so far. But before we get out of here, I don't know if you've actually ever listened to an episode or if Alex told you about the way of the land in this area. But there's two things we like to do before we get out of here.
Okay.
Number one is you get to shout out a local legend who you think should come on the show.
Okay.
And number two is you kind of already done this, but you get to give advice to someone who might need a kick in the ass to start their creative project.
Local legend. Who? Yeah. It's so funny because I feel like Alex said, get Casey on the podcast, but I am just so inspired by him and just his like attitude towards life. I'm trying to think, who do I spend time with? He consumes my whole world lately.
I'll put myself on the podcast.
I was actually gonna say, I was like, man, you're one of the coolest people I know. I'll interview you next. How's that?
I'm scared for that.
I'll ask you questions. Moment. I reckon, yeah, Jesse Murphy. That's who I want to nominate as my local legend.
Can you do that? Can you actually like put yourself on your own?
I guess you make your rules. Why don't next week I interview you? I have so many questions I want to ask you anyway about your life, and
I think that would be a cool. Actually, I'll talk to you about a concept after this because
let's just keep talking for the next 2 hours. I
don't want to tell people about this though because now I'm intrigued about this.
All right, cool.
But it can't be me. It has to be someone else.
Yeah, maybe with that attitude. Nah, I'm committed. Jesse Murphy, volunteer.
All right.
Otherwise, let me come back to you. I feel like I need to think about that because you've had so many great people on. TJ, I love his stuff. Jolly Femme, she's amazing. I love her stuff. I've seen them a lot lately. Actually, you know what? I would say Sunday Dreaming, the label. I love her clothing. Not only is she like an amazing, amazing designer and creator, her clothes are so high quality, but also whatever I choose to work with and alongside, I really care about the ethics behind it. I really care about what I always say, like, you've got to care about either how it's affecting the planet, how it's affecting people, or, like economically or whatever. But her stuff is like so beautifully made. She uses all these like handmade, local, ethical, environmentally friendly products and creates the most beautiful clothing. So I would say Sunday Dreaming, the label, or Collective Rituals as a whole. There's 2 women in there, and one of them produces fragrances and stuff like that, but her stuff's amazing. She has a beautiful story. She lived in Cambodia for ages. And then the other lady who's producing the clothing, Sunday Dreaming, her stuff's really amazing as well. But I just love people that subscribe to the ethics that they believe in and really produce their whole life to make that the center, of what they do, who they are, what they produce. All of it is surrounded by what they believe in. And I really like that. So I put forward Neeks at Sunday Dreaming. And what was the other question?
Yeah, you get to give advice to someone who needs a kick in the ass to start their creative
Advice to someone who needs a kick in the ass. My friend Mia Tenzin, just start being famous already. You're cooler than everybody else I know. I don't know. I just feel like do the shit you want to do. If you're letting other people make decisions for you or whatever's trendy, make decisions for you or whatever, or you're just like fucking scared to do whatever you want to do the stuff you want to do because you're the only person who has to live with the consequences at the end of the day.
Bang. That is...
Mic drop.
Mic drop.
There's no mic to drop, but...
Well, Casey, it has come to the end. I'd like to share a shout out, a special mention to everyone that has been following so far. Thank you all so much. It truly doesn't go unnoticed. I am very, very grateful and I'm very blessed to be able to do what I do. There's events coming up in November for the official launch party of the podcast. There's merch dropping very soon. Thank you again to Casey for coming on, sharing your story. I know there's much more to your story, so we'll definitely be having you back on again. And you know the drill, gang. We out.
Ciao.